When night falls in the Appalachian Mountains, the mist hides more than just the ancient trees. Locals whisper that if you listen closely, you'll hear the footsteps of the lost, or catch a glimpse of eyes that shouldn't be there watching. From the woods, tonight, we uncovered 10 real-life ghost encounters so chilling you'll never look at these mountains the same way again. Are you brave enough to hike into the dark? Story 1: The Phantom Hiker of Grandfather Mountain.
On the ancient trails winding through Grandfather Mountain, seasoned hikers and wary locals alike speak with unease about an encounter that fills the forests with dread. As daylight fades and the infamous Appalachian mists begin their slow descent, many have testified to the unnerving presence of a lone figure standing motionless on a narrow bend in the trail. This phantom hiker is always seen in faded, decades-old hiking attire: a woolen shirt, canvas trousers, battered boots, and a broad-brimmed hat that shadows a face few have truly seen. Witnesses recount that the figure never utters a word. His posture is rigid, head bowed just enough to obscure his expression, yet his presence bleeds unease into the silence. No matter how quietly one approaches or how swiftly one tries to overtake him, the hiker glides ahead with impossible ease, his boots never making a sound on the leaf-littered ground. Sometimes, hikers describe an abrupt and unnatural coldness settling over the path, so frigid that it chills to the bone even in midsummer. Many have tried to close the gap, but as they press forward, a heavy fog thickens unexpectedly, sapping both light and nerve. Eyes lose sight for just a moment and, when clarity returns, the path is empty save for the echo of snapping twigs or the swaying of ferns, as if someone or something has just stepped out of sight. Occasionally, the air fills with the scent of campfire smoke or the distant crackle of a radio, though nothing is there. Local campfire tales claim the phantom hiker is the restless soul of a wanderer lost to a sudden storm decades ago, his body never found. Some say he was seeking help for an injured friend. Others whisper of a secret the hiker hid deep in the mountains, of forbidden love, an unsolved crime, or a tragic betrayal, leaving his spirit unable to find peace. After such encounters, hikers describe a heavy oppression, nightmares of footsteps trailing theirs, vivid dreams of being watched just beyond the trees, and an irrational reluctance to ever return to that stretch of trail. Old-timers warn that to follow the phantom hiker too far is to risk disappearing as he once did, swept away into the fog, never to return. The legend endures, and Grandfather Mountains shadow a chilling reminder that in these woods, not every traveler finds their way home, and some spirits keep wandering, searching for the path they lost so long ago.
Story to the Ghostly Fisherman of Pierce Pond.
Nestled deep within a fog-laced Appalachian hollow, Pierce Pond sits like a mirror reflecting only secrets. Locals avoid its banks after dusk, warning visitors in hushed voices of a solitary figure who returns there when the moon hangs low and the wind blows east. An old fisherman, cursed by tragedy, whose yearning keeps him tethered to the water's edge. Campers, rangers, and even lifelong mountain men share nearly identical tales that chill the spine. The haunted nights always begin the same way: a soft splash, the unnervingly regular swish of a fishing rod, and a sudden drop in temperature so sharp it fogs your breath even in July. That's when they see him, gaunt and motionless, save for the slow arc of his arm, a tattered shirt clinging to hollowed shoulders, and an ancient straw hat pushed low to hide his features. The ghostly man stares intently into the still water, his face etched with a heartbreak so profound it silences even the tree frogs. Some nights the echoes are unmistakable: the gentle plink of a lure where no line can be seen, the hollow thunk of boots wading through unseen shallows, or the muffled murmur of grief carried across the mirrored surface. Witnesses speak of an overpowering sadness that seems to seep from the fisherman into the air, snuffing out laughter and making the fire's warmth feel distant. Few can bear to watch for long, as an inexplicable loneliness grips the soul, a sorrow that mirrors the losses we hide in the shadows of our own lives. Folklore clings to the pond's dark shoreline, painting the fisherman's tale in shades of truth and legend. Some say that many decades ago, a sudden storm overtook a father and son while they fished here, capsizing their tiny boat. The father plunged in to save the boy, but both vanished beneath the surface. Only the child's body washed ashore days later. Since then, the man's ghost has been glimpsed wandering the banks and wading through the shallows, forever casting and searching, desperate to reclaim what he lost in those black, churning waters. Over the years, the stories have only grown more unsettling. Campers have awoken to find wet, muddy footprints encircling their tents, the scent of old pipe smoke drifting through a windless night. Some recount the feeling of being watched, as if eyes from the water's edge are silently pleading for help. A few report finding a child's toy on an old wooden top or a ragged doll placed near their campsite by morning, vanishing if you look away and return. To this day, locals refuse to camp alone at Pierce Pond. They say that if you hear the spectral plunk of a lure on a windless night or spot ripples with no cause, you should never answer a voice calling from the water, no matter how much it sounds like someone you know. The tragedy that birthed the ghostly fisherman serves as both a supernatural warning and a testament to the enduring pain of loss, reminding all who visit that some hearts broken by the mountains will never find peace, and some souls are doomed to cast their line forever into the mist.
Story 3: The Witch's Cellar in Black Hollow.
Beyond the reach of paved roads and modern navigation, Black Hollow remains one of those places whispered about by locals, tucked between the veiled Appalachian ridges, where dawn's light feels thin and secrets seem to root deeper than the ancient trees. Here the forest breathes heavy and the shadows linger longer, especially near the weather-rotted cabin that sagged into the earth long before living memory. The structure itself is unsettling, leaning at odd, impossible angles, its roof tattered and sagging with moss choking the window panes. But what truly keeps people away, what makes experienced hunters and even reckless teens pause at the edge of the tree line, is the cellar built into the hillside under the back of the cabin, its door bound tight by rusted lengths of chain and heavy locks that seem to sweat orange with every turn of the seasons. The tales began generations ago, when the valley's settlers first tangled with the deep wilds. They spoke of a woman who arrived without family or past. She kept to herself, tending garden plots where nothing should grow and gathering herbs deep in the ravine at dusk. Locals noted her uncanny way with animals. Foxes would stop at the edge of her yard, deer grazed unconcerned as she passed, and stray dogs would sit silent in her shadow, neither begging nor barking. No one saw her at Sunday sermons, and the only time she appeared in town, to barter for salt and candles. Nobody remembered her voice, only the pale clarity of her eyes and the subtle foreign scent she carried, like bruised walnut leaves and dried lavender. As the years passed, sightings of unusual lights in the woods, blue and green spheres that hovered low between the trees at sunset, became frequent. On windless nights, neighbors claimed they could hear a low chanting drifting up the hollow, mingling uneasily with the natural chorus of whippoorwills and distant owls. The boundary between rumor and reality grew thin. Gardens wilted fast under the gaze of a jealous neighbor. Livestock would fall sick or wander off, and sometimes, just before a hard frost or an untimely death, villagers would find strange talismans, bundles of woven twigs and bone, nailed to their fences or tucked beneath windowsills. Children, in their reckless curiosity, tested the edges of these taboos. Dares were staged to sneak up and knock on the cellar door, leave a penny on the threshold, or press an ear to the wood to listen for the rumored murmurs or scratching from within. The bravest boys would boast of hearing voices carried up from the earth, some soft and sorrowful, others urgent and angry. More than one child returned home wide-eyed and mute, and for months afterward was plagued by nightmares and fits that baffled the local doctor and preacher alike. One incident solidified the cellar's evil reputation for decades. A group of teenage friends, flushed with moonshine and bravado, resolved one Halloween night to break through the old chains and explore what no adult would dare. They pried open the warped planks, the cold air from below as thick and stagnant as a sealed tomb. The first two barely made it past the top step before turning and fleeing. The third, emboldened or entranced, went further. By morning he was found wandering the road leading out of Black Hollow, clothes soiled and hair turned shockwhite. He never spoke a word about what happened that night and soon left the mountains altogether. In times of disease, misfortune, or mysterious disappearance, child gone missing, a fire gutting a smokehouse, a shadow flitting across the moonlit snow, the cabin and its cellar became the unspoken scapegoat. Elders revived superstitions. They cut crosses into their door frames, burned sage in the hearth, and forbade anyone from speaking the cellar's name after dark. Some even claimed to see the woman herself, years after her supposed death, a thin figure pacing the wild edge of the hollow, muttering or softly singing as she vanished into the pines. As decades churned on, and automobiles outnumbered horses, the physical structure of the cabin wasted away. Ivy and kudzu pulled hungrily at the porch. The roof gave up to rot, but the cellar endured, its door rebuilt, rechained and circled in salt and iron. Newcomers, lured by cheap land or a desire for solitude, sometimes wandered too close. One couple vanished within their first autumn, their abandoned car found in the nearby creek, its seats sprinkled with wilted wildflowers and feathers. A forest ranger once tasked with mapping the area swore that, although the cellar's door was firmly chained and sealed, he heard frantic scratching from within, like fingernails against stone or the scurry of desperate animals. Stories grew more vivid in the retelling, that when lightning struck near the hollow, it always arced toward the cellar door, that compasses spun wild and phones died in its shadow, that sometimes the earth itself seemed to breathe, exhaling a damp, peat-smelling fog from the cracks between ancient boards. On rare blue moon nights, a few locals described the impossibly faint, flickering lantern glow from below, and, just audible through the chirring of summer insects, a woman's voice softly singing a lullaby no one has ever recognized. To this day, every spring and late autumn, the oldest families of Black Hollow perform quiet rituals they call necessary. Anonymous bundles of dried herbs, old coins, or carved wooden totems are left at the edge of the woods, never too close but always in view of the path leading down to the cabin. No one admits to being afraid outright, yet the eyes of even the hardest mountain men skip hardly over that spot when recounting the valley's history. The Witch's Cellar remains the dark heart of Black Hollow, a boundary between generations, where the hopes and superstitions of the living meet the unquiet mysteries of the past. No modern investigator has managed to spend a whole night on the site. Tapes come back blank, camera batteries die without warning, and anyone who lingers under the moon returns home different in subtle, troubling ways. The older residents know what others refuse to believe, that some doors are chained for a reason. Not to keep us out, but to keep what waits below from ever returning to the world above.
Story for the Screamer of Smoke Ridge.
Cloaked in mist and framed by ancient hardwoods, Smoke Ridge is a place that locals avoid once the sun disappears behind the hills. Deep in this rugged Appalachian country, a terror more chilling than wolves or bears stalks the night, a spectral force known only as the Screamer. Her legend is stitched into the fabric of mountain life, whispered with grave urgency at kitchen tables and campfires all along the ridge. No one can remember a time before the stories, only that from the earliest days, her wail has kept even the boldest souls close to hearth and kin after dusk. The first sign is always a hush, a strangling stillness that descends as darkness coils between the trees and the whippoorwills silence their songs. Then, from somewhere deep in the valley, it begins, a low moan, building slowly until it erupts into a shriek so raw and unearthly it makes windows rattle and animals cower. Some say it can stop the heart of a man with its intensity. As if the mountains themselves were voicing a millennial grief, those unlucky enough to encounter the sound close at hand speak of fear more primal than anything they've known, a paralysis that clings to the skin, making even seasoned hunters drop rifles and stumble blindly toward the safety of home. It's not just the volume but the anguish in that cry. It's as if all the sorrow and rage of generations past pour out with every breath. The bravest recall fleeting glimpses through the hemlocks, the spectral outline of a young woman, her dress torn and hair wild, face frozen in a mask of grief and accusation. There are older folks who tell of a tragedy behind the legend, a family shunned and driven to the woods during a fevered time of fear and suspicion. The youngest daughter, defiant and beloved, fled into the forest as a mob gathered at dusk. No one saw her again, but nights soon rang with the first tormented wails. Some claimed to see her wandering the slopes on moonless nights, her eyes glowing like cold embers and her arms outstretched for something lost. Over the years, the Screamer's cry has been blamed for much. Livestock found mutilated with no sign of predator, crops withering without cause, or children waking feverish and delirious after a night of howling wind. There are stories of men who, emboldened by drink or bravado, tried to hunt the source of the sound. They returned with wild, frantic eyes, if they returned at all, insisting that the woods had changed, that trails no longer led where they should, and that the Screamer's voice seemed to echo from all directions at once, trapping them in a labyrinth of terror until dawn. Others speak of strange phenomena visited upon their homesteads in the aftermath, mirrors shattering at midnight, mysterious scratches appearing on doors, even the sudden death of pets. Old-timers swear by protection's horseshoes, hung above doors, salt sprinkled on thresholds, iron nails hammered into fence posts. Families living on the slopes of Smoke Ridge have their own rituals. No whistling after dark, a lit lantern in the window until dawn, and a firm rule that no one, no matter how urgent the need, ventures outside if the Screamer is heard. Yet even for those who heed every warning, the fear persists. Hikers and travelers who camp above the old logging trails describe sleepless nights marked by the distant, sorrowful cry. Some awaken to find claw-like marks raked across tree trunks and footprints, circling their tent, sprints too large for any wild animal and too misshapen to be human. A local minister relates an experience where, upon hearing the Screamer's voice, he found his flock gripped by unexplained illness for a week thereafter, recovering only when he led them in prayers at the edge of the woods. Despite countless attempts to explain away the legend calls of predatory animals, tricks of the wind, or madness born of isolation, the stories endure, renewed with every generation. Tales pass from mother to daughter, father to son, a warning thicker than blood. When the Screamer cries, you lock your doors, keep your family close, and pray her search passes you by. In the end, the people of Smoke Ridge do not live in constant terror, but with a wary respect for the sorrow that walks their hills. They know that in these mountains, some wounds never heal, and some voices raised in anguish long ago will echo as long as the mist clings to the hollows, reminding everyone that tragedy never truly disappears, and the Screamer is always listening for the next soul to hear her call.
Story 5, The Lantern Man of Laurel Gap.
Laurel Gap weaves upward through steep, bramble-choked slopes and ancient dogwoods, its trails vanishing into a mist so thick it seems to swallow all sound. For over a century, the people of this ridge have shared one unwelcome bond, the dread of a wandering light that appears after midnight, swinging back and forth as if searching for something or someone lost to the mountain's hunger. They call him the Lantern Man, and his legend is carved as deep into the valley as the old railway cuts that once scarred the hillsides. The story begins in the railroad days, when Laurel Gap's winding heights were carved open by pickaxe and dynamite. A work crew laboring through the night to finish a crucial stretch before storm season was buried alive by a sudden landslide, their camp crushed, lanterns blown out, no warning. The foreman, frantic with guilt, was said to have vanished into the woods while searching for survivors, carrying only his lantern and his shame. Locals soon began reporting a blue, unnatural light bobbing through the thickets long after the rescue parties gave up. They described seeing a gaunt figure clad in sooty overalls, his eyes empty as the winter sky. The shattered shell of an old railway lantern held aloft like a beacon for the damned. Over time, encounters with the lantern man grew more chilling and detailed. Hikers lost on foggy nights have stumbled onto the narrow, forgotten cuttings of those ancient tracks, only to spot a ghostly blue glow ahead, first a pinpoint, then a whole world of night illuminated in its spectral path. With the appearance of the light, the world seems to grow unnaturally quiet, even suffocating. Crickets cease their song, the wind stands still, and the usual chorus of nocturnal life goes mute, as if the mountain itself is holding its breath. Those who've tried to follow the lantern man never fare well. As soon as they step off the familiar trail, their sense of direction dissolves, footsteps muffled as if treading through water. The woods close in, swallowing up landmarks and turning every direction into a dead end. More than one survivor spoke of hours lost, convinced they were moving in circles, the blue glow dancing always just out of reach, deep in the veil of mist. Some claim they've glimpsed the lantern man's face, streaked with soot and sorrow, eyes hollow with a ceaseless pleading regret. Others tell of a skeletal hand beckoning them onward, only to vanish as dawn breaks, leaving behind bruises shaped like cold fingers where he is said to have touched them. There are families in Laurel Gap who swear that tragedy follows the phantom's appearance. Stories abound of disappeared hikers, dogs gone missing, and freak storms striking without warning within days of a blue glow threading through the hollers. One particularly chilling tale recounts the fate of a search party that saw the lantern wavering in the woods while hunting for a lost child. They followed the light deep into the timber, growing ever further from the trails they knew, only to find the search ended with no trace, save for a child's mitten resting above a shallow, freshly turned patch of earth. Despite generations of warnings, the legend persists and evolves. Campers still leave offerings, rail spikes, a shot of whiskey, or a handful of coins at the mouth of old rail cuts, hoping to appease the lantern man and keep his curse at bay. Old-timers placed blue glass bottles on fence posts, believing they catch and trap wandering spirits. When the mist lies heavy and the woods grow quiet, families gather inside, shutters drawn, telling each other old stories until the first sign of dawn. A few folklorists have tried to unravel the truth behind the lantern man, poring over faded newspaper clippings, family journals, and anonymous reports of phantom illuminations. None can say for certain what haunts the gap, only that something lingers, drawn by guilt, loss, or the impossible weight of unfinished tasks. Some speculate the lantern man is not searching for salvation, but doomed to draw the lost further into the dark, a guide into the mountain's belly, not its escape. In every account, one detail remains the same: a blue light swirling through the branches after midnight, and the chilling certainty that, in Laurel Gap, not every ghost wants to be found and not every story is eager for an ending. Visitors are left with this warning: should you find yourself on the high trails beneath a moonless sky and see the unnatural sway of blue light through the dogwoods, turn back. The lantern man calls out only to those about to lose their way, and in those lonely Appalachian shadows, some paths lead far deeper than the woods alone.
Story 6: The Whistlers of Panther Run.
Panther Run, a steep-walled ravine veiled in layers of shadow and mist, is notorious among locals for more than its treacherous terrain. It's a place that seems to drink in both sunlight and sound, where the ruins of a long-abandoned mining camp crumble beside a creek whose water still runs black with memory. The narrow trail winding through this gulch is avoided after sunset, not because of wildcats or bears, but because of the bone-deep fear inspired by something far stranger. The whistlers, according to generations of mountain folk, an old superstition rules these woods never whistle after dark. The lore is simple but absolute, passed like an heirloom. Sound travels differently here, and music in the night is an invitation to things best left undisturbed. The legend says the whistlers are the restless spirits of miners who died when a sudden collapse buried an entire crew deep beneath a mountain over a century ago. Denied daylight or a decent burial, they wander Panther Run in the velvet black, craving the warmth and company of the living. What makes the tale especially terrifying is the consistency with which similar encounters, separated by decades, are recounted. It always begins the same way. A traveler or camper, lulled by solitude and the chorus of frogs and cicadas, lets out a careless whistle, a snatch of a familiar tune, or perhaps a call to a distant companion. At first, the forest absorbs the sound, but then, somewhere down trail in the darkness, another whistle answers, quieter at first, then stronger, mimicking the tune perfectly in a tone just off enough to set teeth on edge. The back and forth grows until the echo seems to come from all directions down by the water, up on the rocky slopes, or somewhere, just out of sight behind a thick stand of laurel. A prickling cold seeps into the air, birds and insects fall silent, and the sense builds that something unseen is moving through the trees, narrowing the distance with every step. Campers have described seeing flickers of movement, pale lanky shapes weaving between the trunks, faces indistinct, their wide eyes shining in the lantern light. Some say the whistlers' mouths are impossibly wide, frozen in a soundless grin, and when they vanish again into the night, the echoing whistle persists, haunting and insistent. Hunters and hikers who fail to heed the warning tell of being followed all the way back to their cabins, the answering whistle shadowing them, closer and closer, until suddenly it stops, leaving only an ice-cold dread and the weight of unseen eyes boring into their backs. A few courageously or foolishly whistled again after reaching safety, only to hear the whistle respond from outside their windows well into the night. Some sources claim that in the worst cases, victims of the whistlers became lost in the holler, wandering aimlessly until dawn, or simply vanished, leaving behind only their abandoned gear and the memory of that last eerie song on the breeze. For the families living near Panther Run, precaution is ritual. Children are firmly taught, whistle during the day all you like, but after dusk, keep your lips sealed and your songs inside your head. Superstitions persist, doorways are dusted with salt, and wind chimes are never hung outside. Now and then, someone claims to hear a faint, unearthly whistle carried on the mist, even when all should be still. The old mining road, nearly erased by time, sometimes appears freshly trod, as if those trapped souls are still searching for a way out. To this day, the warning endures, repeated around every Appalachian hearth. If you must travel Panther Run at night, move quickly, do not answer any calls, and above all, never whistle unless you're prepared for what may answer you from the darkness, a choir of lost souls, forever longing for life, drawn inexorably to one careless note in the haunted night.
Story 7. The Graveyard Watcher of Pine Hollow.
Deep within the overgrown heart of Pine Hollow, there is a place where no path stays open for long, and even the bravest stumble to a halt as dusk falls. The old graveyard, nearly swallowed by brambles and crowned by twisted oaks whose roots crack open the earth's secrets. Generations ago, this burial ground served as the final resting place for townsfolk, miners and wanderers lost to the mountains. But what unsettles locals even more than the crumbling headstones is the legend that endures, that when darkness gathers and the air turns damp with mist, a solitary figure known as the Graveyard Watcher emerges to keep watch over the dead. The Watcher is described as a tall, gaunt man clad in tattered old clothes, his wide-brimmed hat pulled low above a pale, angular face that never reflects the lantern's dull glow. Witnesses say he paces with a slow, deliberate gait between the gravestones as if conducting a meticulous inspection, sometimes whispering names, other times pausing to stoop and examine a half-buried marker. If anyone dares cross the rusted iron gate after dark on a dare, a drunken bet, or out of desperate curiosity, the air thickens with a clinging chill. Footsteps crunching along narrow paths will suddenly echo eerily, and every sound seems magnified against the hush of the graveyard. Many who've trespassed speak of a suffocating sense of being watched, the urge to glance over their shoulder, becoming unbearable. Swearing they've seen the Watcher, they describe his black eyes blank and endless, fixed, not on the living but on something just beyond sight. Some say the very ground grows colder where he passes, and flickers of lantern light ripple across the granite as he moves. More unnerving still, those who loiter too long or show disrespect report accidents, tripping over unseen roots, doors locking mysteriously behind them, or the sudden loss of electrical devices, cameras and phones inexplicably drained or producing only static and blurred, unnatural shapes. Local lore contends that the Watcher was once the graveyard's devoted caretaker, a widower who, overcome by loneliness and heartbreak, remained at his post long after the living stopped visiting. One especially bitter winter, he was found by dawn's first light, frozen at the foot of his wife's grave. Still clutching his lantern and a handful of wildflowers, it's said his spirit refused to move on, compelled by loyalty and unfinished duty to guard every soul beneath the crooked stones and spring. The resting dead are undisturbed, and that no secret is uncovered by idle hands. In the decades since, tales of his presence have grown only more vivid and numerous. Hunters wandering too close at twilight have had their dogs refuse to enter the grounds, howling and backing away until lead home. Children who risked sneaking in on Halloween have returned white-faced and silent, unable to say what frightened them so deeply. Some townsfolk recount waking in the night to find muddy human-shaped prints on their windowsills facing the cemetery, as if marked by a hand searching for or warning off anyone who might disturb the Watcher's vigil. To this day, the families closest to the cemetery observe strict customs. At sundown, lights are dimmed and windows are kept curtained on the side facing the graveyard. No one speaks the names of the dead aloud after dark or leaves flowers untended, for fear of drawing attention from the Watcher. When fog thickens, and the lantern's glow winks between the stones, People hurry indoors and children recite old rhymes meant to keep restless spirits at bay. In Pine Hollow, the lesson is carved as deep as any epitaph. When the watcher of the graveyard is abroad, it's best to remain indoors and respect the boundary between the living and the dead. For some souls and some secrets refuse to sleep.
Story 8, The Blue Boy of Cold Branch.
Cold Branch winds through the deep heart of the Appalachians, a branchling stream that carves steep bends and hidden hollows where morning frost lingers well into the afternoon. The legend of the Blue Boy is as much a warning as it is a tragedy, woven from a century of sorrowful whispers and eerie encounters, that it began on a night so cold the trees snapped like gunshots and the stars flickered behind racing clouds. A family, desperate to get home before a storm, dared the infamous crossing where Cold Branch claws violently through the rocks. The wagon tipped, pitching the youngest, a boy barely 6, into the freezing current. Despite the frantic rescue, some say their lantern's light caught only his blue cap as the icy waters pulled him out of sight. Over the next days, the valley searched through snowdrifts and along the glazed banks, but only a trail of tiny footprints were found, winding away from the crash point and vanishing abruptly at the stream's edge. In the years and generations that followed, Cold Branch became famous for more than its fierce floods. Old-timers and curious outsiders alike report chilling phenomena on the coldest nights. The sounds come first, a child's soft cries on the wind, sometimes lonely, other times pleading, as if echoing through ice. Hunters returning late feel washed and stumble upon prints in fresh snow, bare child-sized, impossibly spaced from one patch of ice to the next. Some see a small, translucent figure moving just beyond lamplight, a boy with skin impossibly blue, lips trembling as he wanders the banks looking for warmth, for family, or perhaps just for someone to hear him. Campers have awoken, heart pounding, to find their fires burned down low and, just outside the tent, a set of prints circling in the rime, childlike and faint, with melting frost at each toe. Dog walkers speak of their animals freezing in place, hackles raised, eyes focused on shadows by the water where the Blue Boy sometimes stands, silently watching with a gaze both desperate and distant. As the decades passed, villagers began leaving woolen mittens, scarves, and sometimes candies or small toys on low branches near the stream, hoping to appease the restless soul. Some believe these offerings bring reprieve from sudden squalls or bad luck during harsh winters. Yet not all encounters are fearful. There are stories, whispered between relief and disbelief, of hikers on the brink of exhaustion who claim a pale, wavering blue light led them safely to a cabin or back to the main road. These survivors speak of an intense chill that faded as dawn broke, the only trace of child's footsteps that faded with the rising sun. Warnings persist to follow. The Blue Boy's cries is to risk vanishing yourself, led astray by grief or caught in a killer cold snap conjured by restless spirits. Objects left for him on the river's edge sometimes vanish, sometimes return wet and oddly out of place, as though gently moved by a small, unseen hand. Despite the changes of modern life, the Blue Boy of Cold Branch remains an enduring presence, a reminder of the treacherous beauty of the Appalachian wild, of love and longing that even death cannot silence, and of the thin clouded veil that separates the living from those who never made it home. Families still teach their children never to linger near the water's edge after dark, and every winter, someone finds those tiny, vanishing footprints winding along the snow, a haunting testament to a story that is never truly ended.
Story 9, The Lost Bride of Devil's Backbone.
Devil's Backbone is a place where the weather rules with merciless force, where lightning cracks the sky and sudden fogs roll in so dense they smother sound. High atop its twisting trails and jagged cliff lines, the tale of the lost bride has wrapped itself around the region's memory like morning mist. It begins in the late 1800s, with a wedding that was never meant to be. Townsfolk recall the story of a young woman, radiant and full of hope, whose wedding day was dashed by violent storms and the unexplained disappearance of her fiancé. Grief-stricken and desperate, she donned her wedding dress and vanished into the wild cliffs before dawn, never to be found. After the searchers came up empty, finding only her lace veil, snagged and fluttering from a thorn bush at the edge of the precipice, the legend began to take root. Since then, on stormy nights or evenings thick with fog, people have reported seeing the lost bride wandering the rocky spine of the mountain, her dress tattered by years of wind and rain. She is described as heartbreak incarnate, her face pale, eyes hollow with longing, and feet bare and scratched by stone. Nighttime fishermen on nearby lakes and hunters packing up as thunder threatens have seen her silhouette moving along the ridge, illuminated by flashes of lightning, sometimes reaching out into the darkness as if searching for a hand to hold. Some say her sorrow is infectious. The air itself grows heavy, and an unbreakable yearning mingles with the fear that tugs at hikers and wanderers who catch a glimpse of her. The closer anyone dares approach, the more the path distorts. Familiar trails double back, mists blanket the ground, and the bride herself recedes into nothingness, always just beyond reach. Witnesses tell of hearing soft weeping over the wind, or fleeting snatches of music like distant wedding bells, echoing between the cliffs. Over generations, many have linked misfortune to sightings of the lost bride. It's not uncommon for travelers to become inexplicably lost after an encounter, or for equipment to malfunction strangely after witnessing her apparition. Some report a chilling cold that follows them home, or sudden heartbreak and loss darkening their lives in the months that follow. Superstition runs deep. Locals still carry wildflowers to the ridge each spring, placing them atop the cliffs where her veil was last seen, muttering prayers that she might finally find peace. The legend, however, remains stubbornly unresolved. Sometimes entire search parties report odd occurrences, a compass spinning wildly, path once familiar inexplicably blocked by new fallen trees, a sensation that someone unseen is brushing past them in the mist. One old-timer recounted seeing the lost bride staring directly into his lantern's glow, her lips moving as if calling a name, but when he called back, she vanished, leaving only the sound of rain and his own racing heart. Each generation brings fresh tales. A group of campers unnerved by distant crying. A lone cyclist lost 4 hours who described walking in circles below a figure in white, and couples hiking at dusk who suddenly felt pressured to turn back long before reaching the cliffs. Through all the variations, the core story is unchanged. In Devil's Backbone, where storms still batter the heights, and the valley echoes with ancient sorrow. 8. The lost bride continues her endless search, caught between hope and despair. Her presence, a warning to all that in these mountains, love lost and promises broken leave marks the living may never understand or escape.
Story 10. The Midnight Riders of Bear Trap Hollow.
Tucked deep in the Appalachian backwoods, far from the comfort of porch lights and paved roads, lies Bear Trap Hollow, a narrow, twisting stretch of forest road that locals refuse to drive after dark. Even the most hardened hunters and lifelong residents speak of it with unease, their eyes shifting toward the trees when the subject comes up. It's not the wildlife they fear, nor the steep turns or the drop-offs. It's what rides through those woods at midnight, a spectral gang known only as the Midnight Riders. The legend dates back to the 1800s, when a ruthless crew of highwaymen, led by the infamous Jesse Calhoun, terrorized the mountain trails, robbing travelers blind and leaving a trail of fear. They met their grim end one storm-thrashed night when a posse of vigilantes ambushed them at the sharp bend now known as Dead Man's Curve. Gunfire ripped through the rain and lightning lit the trees. As the gang vanished into legend, no bodies were found, only shattered lanterns, blood in the mud, and hoofprints trailing off into the darkness. Locals say the hollow never released them. The forest itself binds them to that final ride. Since then, generations have spoken. A horse hooves thundering through the trees at the stroke of midnight, noises that seem to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Travelers caught in the hollow report headlights flickering and radios hissing into static. The temperature plummets without warning. Then come the riders, a ghostly procession galloping through the mist. Tall figures on jet black horses, draped in shadow-soaked coats, faces obscured beneath wide-brimmed hats. Their lanterns burn a sickly blue, casting unnatural shadows and warping the surrounding woods. Encounters vary, but the terror is always the same. One late-night trucker swore his rig's engine died when the riders appeared, drifting beside his cab in utter silence. He could feel the weight of every single figure watching him, eyes like coals smoldering in the dark. Another couple reported being chased for miles by approaching hoofbeats. They never saw a soul behind them. Yet every mirror reflected a dozen riding forms that vanished every time they turned their heads. Some say the lead rider, believed to be Calhoun himself, raises a skeletal hand toward those who stare too long, as if offering them a place in the parade. Those who meet his gaze are said to suffer strange omens, mirrors cracking, clocks stopping at midnight, and cold handprints forming on their windshields days later. Bear Trap Hollow has become notorious not just for the hauntings, but for how it changes people. Survivors often come away pale, jittery, obsessed with the encounter. A few claim to have lost hours of time drifting down the road, only to wake up miles away with no memory of the drive. GPS devices fail inside the hollow. Batteries drain in seconds. And any photo or footage taken turns up black, like the forest refuses to be captured. Superstitions around the hollow are as old as the tale. Locals still hammer iron nails into fence posts and hang blue glass bottles from the tree offerings and wards meant to confuse or trap spirits. Nobody honks in the hollow. Nobody plays music after dark. And above all, nobody whistles. Older folks say the riders mistake certain sounds as signals from the living calls they feel honor-bound to answer. One wrong move, one wrong sound, and they'll ride toward you with all the force of death behind them. The most mysterious stories come from those who vanish entirely. Hikers whose cars are found still running. Headlights on, with the doors ajar, and no sign of a struggle. Police reports mention muddy boot prints around the vehicles that don't match any modern shoe, as well as frost-coated windshields in the middle of July. It's as if these people weren't taken but invited to ride on. Not every tale ends in fear. A few travelers, those who speak respectfully or leave behind small offerings, claim to have seen the riders pass quietly, trailing mist in silence, leaving behind only the faint scent of gunpowder and campfire smoke. But even these accounts come with a warning. As harmless as the riders may sometimes appear, they never stop, they never look back. And they never truly leave the hollow. Bear Trap Hollow remains a place of dread-soaked beauty. Forested cliffs cloak its mystery in shadow. Even on sunny days, the trees seem to lean in too close, as if hiding something old and angry. Wind whistles strange through the hollows. The road snakes on like a curse etched into the land with every hoofprint burned. By unseen fire, to this day, anyone new to the area is told the same thing, more a command than a warning. Don't drive Bear Trap Hollow after midnight. Don't slow down, don't stop. If you see flickering lights ahead where there should be none, turn around, as the ghostly parade still rides, night after night. And if you see them, if you hear that dreadful soundless stampede closing in behind you, whatever you do, don't look back.